Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sports Lock podcast. Hopefully, you guys are having a good week. I am your host, Ben Mostaller, and tonight we are breaking down week 10 of the NFL, doing daily fantasy bets, start sit, and my predictions for the week. So make sure if you enjoy this is your first time watching, to subscribe, like, and make sure to follow on social media pages on Instagram, Sports Lock Podcast, as well as over on TikTok. And every Wednesday at 9:30 Eastern time, around 9:30, 10 o'clock Eastern time, I'm going to be going live on TikTok on my personal account, which is the Beast Benny Cakes. And we will be answering your fantasy football questions, sports betting questions, anything like that, trades, start sit, you name it, throw it in the chat and I will answer those questions. Last week we had a fantastic turnout, over 25,000 people over there in likes, and we had about, I'm going to say, like 15 questions coming in per 5 seconds. So it was very hard to answer those questions, but that is awesome. I appreciate the support. So if you're coming over from TikTok, thank you. And if you're on my YouTube and want to be live on Wednesday nights with me for me to answer those questions, that'll be at 9:30 Eastern time on the Beast Benny Cakes. But we also have a podcast account, Sports Lock Podcast. We just don't have enough followers over there to get to the 1,000 yet. So make sure you follow Sports Lock Podcast so we can do the lives over on there. But before we move on to week 10, of course, we got to take a step back, look at week 9 and see how we did. With our predictions, we did great, probably our best yet this year, 10-3. Now, the spread betting was not good. We were 4-9, but the over under, what a week for that, 12-1. And I might say myself, the over under this year has been my strong suit. And I am really surprised. I've been doing very well with that. And I think last week maybe was a little rough, but we bounced back in a huge way going 12-1. I don't know the game off the top of my head that we got wrong, but we had a lot of close ones there, a lot of good games. Our locks were 2-2. The locks were 2-2. We did have I'm trying to think of the two that we missed out on. Green Bay -3. I mean, how about Green Bay? They look very bad right now. And I thought, like, this is a must win for them, division rival against the Detroit Lions, who have the worst offense, or I'm sorry, the worst defense in the league. And they held them to barely anything. So the Packers need to do something quick because that team is just bad. But anyways, that was one of our locks that we got wrong and kind of disappointed with that. So how do we do in daily fantasy? Guys, it wasn't the best week for daily fantasy. I wasn't too thrilled with this lineup, but I thought it could have got the job done. Trevor Lawrence, he did his part. He was the 11th best fantasy quarterback in week 9. He had 235 yards, 1 touchdown, and 53 rushing yards. So that was really good. We only paid 5,200 for him, and it paid off. Aaron Jones was the biggest disappointment. I figured against the worst defense in the league that they'd be trying to get the run game going. However, Aaron Jones did suffer an injury during that game and didn't get to finish. So maybe that was a reason why he didn't do as good, but he only had 6.5 fantasy points. Travis Etienne is the guy that balled out and a guy that you want for the rest of the season on your team. Of course, with no James Robinson there, he's the lead back, and he had a great game, the third best fantasy running back in week 9, 109 yards and 2 touchdowns. At wide receiver, Hopkins had his worst game so far coming back. He had 4 receptions for 36 yards and a touchdown. I know that a lot of people would say, boy, that's still pretty good, which 13.6 is good, but not from what we saw the 2 weeks prior. Juju Smith-Schuster, probably our best buy there, 8th best overall, and he's been coming alive in that Chiefs offense, becoming their wide receiver 1, 10 receptions for 88 yards. Tyler Boyd, a guy that I thought would have a better day, especially with, no Jamar Chase there. Only 9.4 fantasy points, 5 receptions, 44 yards. And finally, Devin Duvernay is the guy we paid cheap. And there's a reason we did that. Only 1 reception for 5 yards. Really surprised because he was their wide receiver 1, no Andrews, and no Bateman. So Duvernay was the guy, and they didn't go to him. Tight end Evan Engram, another very big disappointment. 1 catch, 8 yards. I thought he had a great matchup. I thought they were going to utilize him more. Our defense, 10th best overall in week 9, 7 points from them. That was a total of 101.9. And I really truly think that this coming weeks is going to be one of the best yet. So hang tight. Shortly here, we'll go over our week 10 daily fantasy. And I think you're going to like that a lot better than this. Our week 9 start sit results. Trevor Lawrence, we have already discussed him, but a nice start if you had him this week of 16.7 fantasy points. A pretty good sit of Matt Stafford. He was a 22nd best fantasy wide receiver, only 10.5, or not wide receiver, quarterback, 10.5 fantasy points, 22nd overall. So a good sit there. These two should have been flipped. Michael Carter was the sit, and he should have been the start. He was 10th amongst fantasy running backs, 15.6 fantasy points, 76 yards and a touchdown he had, where David Montgomery only had 5.4, and he had 36 yards on the ground, and primarily due to the huge rushing day of Justin Fields. So we should have swapped those two, but unfortunately we didn't. Thought that Montgomery would have a bigger day. At the wide receivers, Tyler Boyd at 9.4. Already talked about him. Should have been a lot better than that. And I hope he sat Brandon Cooks because he didn't even play last Thursday. Of course, before the podcast was out, he was going to play. So that is probably the best sit ever, right? 0 points. And we moved to the tight end, Evan Engram, very disappointing at 1.8. But how about our sit? Even worse, Tyler Conklin, 1.7, 1 reception for 7 yards. So Engram got one more yard. That's why you should have sat or started him over Tyler Conklin. But no, 2 terrible weeks for those two tight ends. So week 9 a little shaky with our daily fantasy and our start sit, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I'm not perfect, but we're going to move past that. That's what we do. We look forward to the next week and ways to win. And we're going to start with our predictions and bets. And on Thursday night is a rematch between the Atlanta Falcons, the Carolina Panthers, that insane overtime game we just had 2 weeks ago, where the Atlanta Falcons were able to hold off that late drive by the Carolina Panthers. Right now, the Falcons are on the road, and they are 1.5 point favorites. The over under of 44. I like Atlanta in this one to get revenge. I think they are the better team, and we saw Carolina just get pummeled last week by the Cincinnati Bengals. I do think that Atlanta bounces back. They got the better team, and very close game. I do think it hits over again. It was a lot of points on the board last time, so 44 is still really low for me. So I would hammer that over on Thursday night. My first lock of the week comes to you from Munich this week is the Seattle Seahawks face the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And right now, the Seahawks are plus 2.5. I like them outright this week. The Seattle Seahawks beating the Arizona Cardinals in Arizona last week and winning that division right now is looking phenomenal. The Buccaneers had a must win against the Rams last week, but the Rams not that good. So I really like Seattle. I'm gonna ride their hot streak, and you get them at plus 2.5. Again, I'd play them outright. But Geno Smith surprising a lot of people. Ken Walker has been coming alive, rookie of the year implications there with him. And of course, 2 great wide receivers in Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. So Seattle plus 2.5 is the play. I'm betting them to win outright as well. That is a lock for this coming Sunday. Another lock that I'm going with is Minnesota plus 6. Now, right now, I believe it's gone down, and that's because of the status of Josh Allen. He is battling an arm injury right now, and we don't know what's going to happen. I heard it's something that's going to nag him for a while, but he might not miss time for it. Either way, if Allen plays, I do see the line going up closer to that plus 6. I'm locking that in because the Vikings are a very good team, one of the best in the NFC. And Buffalo just lost to the Jets. So they come back. They need that win. But in reality, if Josh Allen doesn't play, Minnesota probably will be favored. If he does play, you're looking at the line being maybe 4, 5, 6 points. As of making this podcast, when I wrote this up, +6 was the line, and that's a lock for me because two great teams in this one. Buffalo doesn't blow out teams unless they're named Pittsburgh. So I am going to ride Minnesota Vikings +6 on the road. Over under, I'm playing the under, but the lock is Minnesota +6. Even if it goes down to, Minnesota +3.5, I'd still lock that in because I think they can win outright. I do think it's a field goal game, though, that Buffalo does pull it out with Josh Allen. Without Josh Allen, Minnesota wins outright. All right, we're going right to another lock, and that is Detroit at Chicago. Chicago looks really good. And when I mean really good, being led by Justin Fields, he has been the number one fantasy quarterback in the last 4 weeks, and he has just gone off the rails with his rushing ability. He had about 180 yards rushing last week. That is insane. Now, he doesn't know how to throw the ball too well, but he will learn that his feet are going to help him. And he's going up against the worst defense in football with the Detroit Lions. So you're telling me Chicago at home with Justin Fields playing that well, that the Detroit Lions are going to come in and beat them? No way. Chicago -3 is the play. It is a lock, and I'm playing under 48.5. Denver at Tennessee. Denver coming off the bye. Russell Wilson gets a chance to get healthy again. We don't know what's going to happen with Ryan Tannehill with Tennessee. I was tempted to take Tennessee -3. If Tannehill plays, I will take that bet. If he doesn't, then I'm not going to really lock it, but still something that I would look at, Tennessee money line. But I liked Tennessee -3 to play this week. And over under, I'm going to go under 39. Denver struggles to put points on the board, and Tennessee doesn't do so either. Jacksonville +9.5 at Kansas City. Jacksonville coming off a big win and a comeback win against the Raiders last week. Kansas City playing a tight one with the Tennessee Titans there. So I think this game will be a little bit closer than a 9.5. I think that's a lot of points. This Jacksonville team has a good offense. They can put points on the board. We talked about Travis Etienne and how good he is, and Christian Kirk is coming alive. So I like Jacksonville to cover the 9.5, but the Kansas City Chiefs to win this game. They are the better team, of course, but I think it's going to be a lot closer than people expect. I would go over 50.5. I think this is kind of a shootout game, a big game for Trevor Lawrence, of course, but I think Patrick Mahomes gets in a groove. Big day for his wide receivers, and we hit the over 50.5. Cleveland +3.5 at Miami. Miami coming off the entertaining win against Chicago last week. Coming back home, they host Cleveland coming off the bye. I also think this is going to be a closer game, but Miami at home, giving them -3.5, and I'm playing over 48.5. Houston is +6.5 at the New York Giants. Look, I'm going to take Houston +6.5. They've been competing in games and even were in the game for a while against the Philadelphia Eagles. So I think they do make this a close game, and it is at New York. The Giants coming off the bye, so maybe a little bit rusty. Give me the Giants to win outright, but Houston to cover the 6.5. I have over 40.5. I think that's very close. I think it is slightly going to go over like 42. But that one is a tough one to play. I think this game just in general is overall a tough play this week. But if I had to bet it, Houston +6.5, but the Giants to win outright. The New Orleans Saints travel to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh coming off the bye. The Saints -2.5 right now on the road, and I'm going to take that. Pittsburgh is looking rough, and I do think that Pittsburgh could win this game. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't. But you get them, we get them, sorry, at -2.5. That is really good. The Saints have shown some dominance in some games. They've been close in some games. I think that they go into Pittsburgh and beat them by at least a field goal. So that's the play. And the over under, I'm going under 40.5 because Pittsburgh doesn't know how to put up points. Simple as that. Moving on to the Indianapolis Colts +6.5 at Las Vegas. The Raiders, they have been so close in so many games, blowing leads. They should be better than the record shows. But the Colts not much better. Firing Frank Wright this past week, their head coach, and bringing in Jeff Saturday as the interim head coach. How will they do? They're going with Sam Ellinger again. So with all of those things happening, I don't think the Raiders at home can blow this one. I like the Raiders to win this -6.5, and I'm playing under 42.5 because of the bad quarterback play by the Colts. Dallas at the Green Bay Packers, the Cowboys, they are coming off a bye. And I think that they win in a big way in Green Bay. So give me them -5, and I'm playing over 43. Again, the Packers were locked for me last week. No, they're on my naughty list now. They can't get the job done. They just look very bad. So I'm riding Dallas -5. Arizona +3 at the Los Angeles Rams. Matt Stafford, concussion protocol. Will he play or not? I don't know. Arizona coming in, Kyler Murray banged up. What's going to happen? This could be a really ugly game. I think the under is probably a good lock for this one. 43.5 is where it's at right now. And if neither of those quarterbacks play, this will go below 40. But buy it right now if you can, under 43.5. I'm taking the Rams to cover that 3 as of now. Things could change leading up to Sunday, though. Sunday Night Football, we have the Chargers at the Niners. Niners coming off their bye. The Chargers are all banged up. Can they get a win? A must-needed win for them to keep going in the AFC. I like the Chargers to cover the 7. I do think it'll be a competitive game. I do think it hits over 46.5 points will be put up on the board. Two of the best running backs in the game, Christian McCaffrey versus Austin Eckler. That'll be a phenomenal matchup to watch. But I do like the Niners to win this one in San Fran on Sunday night. But a close game against the Chargers and a high-scoring affair. And lastly, it is our last lock, and we're locking in Washington +11 at the Philadelphia Eagles. Look, the Eagles are the number 1 team. They haven't lost yet. I think Washington can give them a run for their money on Monday night. However, I still think Philadelphia wins, but Washington +11 is the play. I think it's within the double digits there. If you want to tease it up to somewhere around 14.5 to cover by 2 touchdowns, go for it. That's something I might do. But in this one, I think it hits under 44, and it's a closer game than people think. I think it's going to be Philadelphia 24, and I would go Houston, maybe 14, 17, somewhere around there. That's my prediction for this coming week on Monday Night Football. So now let's go to daily fantasy. And I told you guys I'm excited about this week's daily fantasy, and I think this team is just going to blow up this week. We're going with Justin Fields, the number 1 quarterback in fantasy the last 4 weeks, going up against the worst defense, and he's only 6,500. What a steal for Fields this coming Sunday at that price. So I'm riding that all day. We're also going to pay up for Christian McCaffrey going up against a terrible Chargers run defense, and he looked phenomenal in his last game. A rushing touchdown, a passing touchdown, and a receiving touchdown. He's going to be their offense, and he is going to be great. So yeah, it's 9,400, the most we are paying for a running back probably all season. But this is worth it. He's going to get us the points, and he's not going to struggle like some of our running backs did last week. We're also going to grab Dameon Pierce, the Houston running back, for 6,300. I think that's good value. He's a workhorse back. He had 27 carries against the Eagles last week for 139 yards. A little bit easier of a matchup against the Giants, so I like Dameon Pierce this week. For our wide receivers, we're going with 3 close wide receivers that have been performing really well lately. Not so much big names, but they get the job done. Number 1's Brandon Ayuk. We're going back to a San Fran guy. We get him for 6,400. And Ayuk has been the guy, and I think he will continue to be the top wide receiver. I know Deebo Samuel's coming back, but I think Ayuk is still the top guy because of Christian McCaffrey. They always went to Deebo Samuel. They ran him a lot, and now with McCaffrey there, he's going to take over those plays that Deebo Samuel normally got. So, but this is going to open up the passing game, and who's going to benefit? I believe it's going to be Brandon Ayuk. So I'm taking him. He's been a top 10 wide receiver the last 4 weeks, so let's ride those hot stats. We are then going back to Juju Smith-Schuster. Did such a good job last week. Only 6,000 this week, and he is the number 6 fantasy wide receiver in the last 4 weeks. He has been getting the looks. He's the number one wide receiver for the Chiefs, and the Chiefs have a pretty good matchup against that Jacksonville Jaguars defense this week. So give me Juju. I also really like Joshua Palmer of the Los Angeles Chargers, and I think that he will have a big week. He's their number one wide receiver if Keenan Allen doesn't play this week. And we saw that last week, and what happened? He had 8 receptions for 106 yards. So that will continue if Keenan Allen goes down. Even if he plays, he's still going to be banged up a little bit. Josh Palmer will get the looks like he did last week. And lastly, we got to get a cheap guy because we're paying up for Christian McCaffrey. That guy's going to be Donovan Peoples-Jones. Only 4,300 this week, and I think that's a steal. This guy has had an average of 12 fantasy points on the road, and they're on the road against Miami this week. Miami's defense not the best. So I think Donovan Peoples-Jones will be a big asset of that and have another double-digit week as he's been averaging on the road. So give me him for 4,300. Tight end, we're going Jawan Johnson of the New Orleans Saints. He has been playing some really good football lately, getting the looks down in New Orleans. 3,000 only for him. And our defense, we're going to pay low for. We're going with the Vikings. And again, if Josh Allen doesn't play for 2,200, that's a steal. If he does play, we'll take a little hit with our defense because we got to pay up everywhere else. Lastly, our week 10 start sits. Start Jimmy Garoppolo. I think he has a big week against the Chargers defense. We talk Christian McCaffrey. We talk Brandon Ayuk. That means Jimmy Garoppolo should have a big day too. We're going to sit Aaron Rodgers going up against that tough Dallas defense. Rodgers just hasn't been the same. His wide receivers are hurt. And if they want to win the game, they're going to have to rely on the run game. So Rodgers shouldn't be a big factor this week at home against Dallas. We're going to start Travis Etienne, and if you're not starting him, you need to every week now. He is a key guy to winning your fantasy leagues. If not, maybe even go out and trade for him if you can. You might have to give up a good chunk of pieces of your team to get him, but he's well worth it. Expect 80 plus rushing yards and 1 to 2 touchdowns for him this week against the Chiefs. I'm going to sit Aaron Jones, another Green Bay Packer, but Aaron Jones may or may not play due to his injury, but it's leaning towards he will play. And if he does, I just don't think he's going to be a factor against this Dallas Cowboys defense. So I think he is a must sit just as Aaron Rodgers is. We jump back to Brandon Ayuk, talked about why he's been great and why he's on my daily fantasy for the week. Jimmy Garoppolo is a start. That means Brandon Ayuk is the guy. He is a must start in leagues this coming week. And a must sit is Gabriel Davis of the Buffalo Bills. No Josh Allen could hurt him. And Davis has been quiet recently. So I think that he is a sit if you have him this coming week. And finally, our start, we got to go with Jawan Johnson. We're picking him up in daily fantasy. He's been getting the job done. So he's a start for me. And Evan Engram's got a bad taste in my mouth for last week. Only 1 reception for 8 yards. So I'm going to give him a sit status this week against the Kansas City Chiefs on the road. But guys, I want to thank you for joining in and listening to this podcast. I do this every week. And then I go live on TikTok Wednesday nights around 9:30, 10 o'clock Eastern time. You can get notified by following me on my personal TikTok account, the Beast Benny Cakes, when I do go live. But check in 9:30 Eastern time on Wednesdays, and you should see me over there. And what can you do there? Well, I'll be answering your questions as far as daily fantasy, fantasy start sit, fantasy trades, anything with fantasy or sports betting. I will answer those questions for you. And if I don't get to your question, you can message me on Instagram, Sports Lock Podcast, and I will answer it over there. But I got to get going now. We're getting close to that 9:30 mark to go over on TikTok. But thank you for listening in. I want to wish you the best of luck in week 10 in the NFL with your bets in fantasy football. We're getting closer to the fantasy playoffs. So now is a crucial time to really lock in, see who you can trade for, and see if you can potentially make a run for the playoffs. I'll be the guy to help you with that. So I will see you all next week for the week 11 podcast. I will hope to see you on TikTok as well, and I will talk to you later. Have a good one.